Hello, thanks everybody for joining us today for our reliability and visibility webinar. My name is Charley Dehoney. I'm the CEO of FreightMango, a digital freight marketplace that's automating all of the elements of global trade and bundling the services that importers need to move their products around the world. Happy to be here as the moderator with some of the brightest minds in logistics technology and visibility in particular. And I know everybody's eager to get going on the topics today, so Kyle Henderson, CEO of Vizion. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. As you said, CEO of Vizion. I'm also one of the co-founders. We've been in the market for about 4 years now, and what Vizion focuses on is providing easy, instant access to ocean visibility data. So those types of events, vessel arrived, container discharged, et cetera, et cetera. And we do it in a way that makes it very easy to work with data. Modern APIs supports this transition to all infrastructure being in the cloud and getting connected to your partners very quickly.
Awesome. Excited to get your guys' perspective today on what we're seeing. Next up with RPA Labs is Liao.
Hello, Charlie. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm the VP of Sales for RPA Labs. RPA Labs is a newly founded company. We've been around for about 2 years. We focus on helping logistics company automate their manual processes. The thing that we focus on is to help them to automate documents, conversations, and some workflow. We have quite an interesting product around visibility, and we'll be happy to discuss further with the team and the panelists.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Glenn. Dan with Anvil.
A pleasure to be here. So name is Dan Magida, Senior Global Ops at Anvyl. Anvyl is a supplier relationship management platform that gives companies visibility into their production orders, manage their suppliers, and just ensure that everything in their first stages or later stages of production get to the correct warehouses or fulfillment centers.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Dan. Last but not least, James Coombes with Vector.ai.
Cool. Thanks, Charlie. Hello. James. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Vector.ai. We remove the roadblocks to amazing operations for freight forwarders. So for us, in terms of visibility, a lot of what we do is we deal with things like internal visibility at a freight forwarder and help teams work together. We've been going for almost 3.5 years now, and yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we've got a pretty broad swath across the industry of service providers and folks that are reaching out and spending time discussing with shippers and BCOs, the current needs of the market. So really excited to get going. For the context today, I think we just all want to agree that enhanced visibility is what's helping companies track their performance, make better decisions, and ultimately meet their customers' expectations. And with all of the claims about data reliability and many companies out there having raised lots of money recently around the idea of providing the highest quality data, what we're seeing is with the global complexity around supply chain today, we're seeing that the success of this organization, these visibility initiatives, all comes down to the quality of the data. So none of us would be here talking about this today if the current systems in place were as reliable as the customers expected them to be. And with Amazon continuing to innovate and drive customer expectation and really steer the story and conversation around global trade and e-commerce, let's just jump right in and start talking about what about the current systems are broken and how are we all driving better quality processes and quality information through our businesses. So first, we'll start off. I'd love to hear from Dan at Anvil how customers are looking further upstream in the supply chain maybe than we've thought about previously in the visibility conversation, and how some of that better upstream quality information is helping organizations produce better results.
No, yeah, definitely. And from Anvil, we have actually a pretty strong group of coworkers who've worked on the D2C side as well, which actually shapes a lot of our production cycles internally. And what we've seen is and I've been on this end as well, where especially in this D2C world, product is key. Getting product as fast to your consumers is so important, especially with Amazon with their whole 2-day initiative that they've launched a couple years ago. But how do you get that product to your customers in a timely fashion without actually sacrificing your margins and running out of inventory? And a lot of those things stage in that first mile of your production. So at Anvil, we really focus on is quality at a few different levels. One is just data quality. Are your POs matching to what's being shipped out? How is your communication between you guys, which we track through the platform as well, and we can save all that information, because you do get buried in emails, especially if you have with the same supplier but multiple different things on order, but only one thing may be crucial to production that could be held up. What is your mass production quality? Do you have those first articles of inspection, outgoing quality reports? Have your products been golden sampled and verified? Are there raw material shortages? And just getting that correct information, but while also Anvil is used as a central source of truth, we have milestone accuracy around those order statuses, PO acceptance, PO rejections, and tracking those dates against those target shipment dates that you have aligned with your suppliers, and making sure that on the way those milestones are being hit so you can get your product to your consumers as fast as possible.
That's fascinating. I think giving the supply chain team a place to live is critical, right? Sales and marketing technology wouldn't have evolved as far as it has in the past 25 years if the CRM never became sort of normal. So I think that's awesome. Next, James, I would love to hear from you, because when you're willing to go to market and tell customers that we're going to give you amazing operations, I would imagine that sets up some pretty high expectations going into the initial conversation. So let's talk about some of the ways that you guys have been able to go in and help make sense of some disparate data sources and help the customers execute.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Yeah, look, the tagline definitely is ambitious for sure.
I love it.
But you gotta think big. It's funny, when we were first starting out, like one of the mantras we kind of live by is that it takes the same amount of effort to build a small company than it does a big company. So you may as well go out to build a big one, right? So it follows with a whole kind of the ambitious side on the amazing operations bit for sure. Now, that said, so look, what is our perspective? So I think sometimes the problem in supply chain is that it's so big, it's just amorphous blob, right? It's huge. It could be anything. And so for us, it's really important to be just super focused. And what do we do when we talk about amazing operations? We're not doing it really at the BCO level. We're doing it at the freight forwarder level.
Correct.
And so that's always going to be the context with which I would answer these questions, because it's what we know best. And my argument on the freight forwarding side, you mentioned like data quality. Freight forwarders have all the data. That's
but sometimes they have too much, right? And it's in a whole bunch of different places.
So it's complete. It's siloed. It's all over the place. It's unstructured. Kind of drilling down to actually what counts. That's the hard part. And that's kind of where we come in. In my mind, it's a perfect world. It's a perfect use case for tech like ours. We're an AI company. We understand unstructured data. We help put it together in a structured way, and it's basically just helping forwarders use the data they already have, and use it in a better way. So that's our focus. That's how we provide value. The great follow-on from that is that once you provide that data and that clarity on that data, I mean, really, the world's your oyster, right? You can do so much with that once you have it. But we kind of, we followed that string. We went kind of right down to basics. And the fact is, the data quality is not there. So how do we help that? And then what does that unlock? That's our perspective.
Yeah, well, that's, I mean, certainly at the core of what these global transportation organizations are trying to solve for and manage for as the new digital, sort of native companies are coming to market. So right place, right time, and excited to kind of continue to see where the business goes there. So Glenn, I'd like to hear from you. A lot of the team at RPA has come from Catapult, the best in breed rate management software for the freight forwarding industry. And now you guys are really trying to sort of like eat the whole whale by connecting all of the systems. So how is RPA's approach coming into a broader section of the market different than maybe you were at Catapult, and how are you helping the customers connect the dots?
Yeah, Charlie, that's a great analogy, and also kind of a really thinking point about how we're approaching our customer. You're right that we're essentially facing a much bigger kind of a whole vertical of the supply chain versus just that one particular segment in the rate management, right? Now, how we actually approaching that is we actually also stay very focused, right? Our primary target is still the freight forwarders and the 3PLs. I would say probably more freight forwarders than anything else. Now the focus is really on the operational process that's essentially preventing them from being more efficient, not able to scale as fast as they like. I think as James said that small company and big company, they seem to be able to kind of just ram with a similar kind of ratio of the resources and then get it up there. And really what we're trying to do is that give the customer the power to really scale without adding more people and doing the work. I think what we're doing in this space is really trying to be focused on, say that, with the freight forwarder side, right? How they interact with their different systems, getting the data from system A to B, right? We really focus on, getting the shipping document data, like that scatter around, that is being manually inputted by either the back office, local office, or regional office, and just have a seamless way to get all of the information from those scatter plates and then digitize them into their, say, the operating system, right? I think that's that aspect of that. And on top of that is we're just really looking at how the freight forwarders are struggling in automating the process. We have heard from those big guys that it takes them 2 or 3 years to just get some automation solutions out there, right? So we are focused on those kind of pre-built concepts because we know the space, we understand the pain points. So we focus on the areas like the documents and then the areas like conversation. There's just so many conversations going on via emails, right? The ops takes about 24, 40 hours to respond to a rate, to an email request, right? We read their conversation, understand the components of what the customers ask, and automate those responses back. So I think when it goes back to like, being the eating the whole whales and also being focused, we're just looking at what are the most painful kind of manual process freight forwarders are dealing with day in and day out, and focus on that. And for what we see is documents, is conversation. And then finally, to link all of them together is kind of through a workflow approach, right? How do you get them into like a structure? How do you respond to a email with those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps? How do you automate those document input with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps? And that's kind of how we come about. And I can, in a little bit, probably discuss a little bit more on the visibility space. Essentially, is that customer have just so many manual touch points in getting those data, and then that's where they come to us for help. Is that, hey, I have 50 different data points, and how can you automate those data points and manual data fetching for me and get them into one place and provide us visibility as needed. And I think that's where we really coming in terms of this topic. But yeah, that's kind of where we had kind of a long introduction on how to tackle it, but I think we're staying quite focused in this space.
Thanks for the detail. I mean, I think it brings a lot of thoughts, and excited to unpack it further as we go here. But I think the key trend and the key theme that I'm hearing is right now is an interesting time to be in the RPA business, because without some of the data collection sources and the sort of opening the APIs and some of these other trends that we've seen, really, and folks out there helping companies collect their data, normalize their data, certainly that's going to help automate some of those processes along the way. So Kyle, I think interesting themes there, and certainly I think some of what informed the thesis with the team at Vizion, as you guys were building other products over the years and seeing that there wasn't just an easy way to collect this data and do with it whatever you please. So I guess this is some of what we're hearing has to make you excited as somebody who's really just like getting to market now and really starting to hit your growth phase of your business.
Yeah, and that pain of dealing with access to quality information was both a surprise and a driver for us here at Vizion, because we're kind of new to the logistics, transportation, supply chain space. Most of our team actually came out of analytics companies from Silicon Valley, geospatial intelligence or mapping companies out on the East Coast as well. And we also came with a perception and almost honestly an unfair expectation that the software we were used to building in other industries, it would be the same way of building it once we got to this industry. And we were very surprised that, there were really no APIs. There was none of the infrastructure we were used to building. Most companies hadn't really moved up to cloud yet in some way. And for us, when we really started thinking about quality and what quality meant to us and was going to mean to our customers, we said, well, we want to support the industry and really moving to what other industries have proven works and scales in terms of technology. And to do that, we had to focus on the quality of both our service and the data we provide. And it's almost like a different kind of mindset in some sense. We just stay hyper focused. We're just working around the ocean data set. And we also wanted our service to be 100% automated, 100% run by servers in the cloud, delivering the data and information our customers need. And that was a bit of a mindset, because I hear the pains and challenges of tackling what was manual data collection, emails flying around, faxes, phone calls, trying to turn literally paper documents into data structures of some sort. And our focus was very much, okay, well, we need to have a service that doesn't even make that a pain point anymore for our customers, completely eliminates it. And this is why we focus solely on creating an API around ocean visibility. And for us, it was quality, and that service was, uptime, 100% automated, amazingly easy to start your tracking. You need so little information. It's just a container number, a bill of lading number, a booking number. You don't need to know anything else to start your tracking. So we wanted to keep a very low bar in getting started. And so that was what quality meant to us around service. But then in data quality, it was also an interesting topic for us, because what we saw was the industry had kind of evolved over the last few years, where, go back 5 years, shippers or BCOs, big brands, they just wanted to know what the ETA was. When was the boat going to arrive at port? And they kind of like, if you tell me the name of the boat, that's all I need. But like, we have seen a lot change in the last 18 months or so, where that isn't enough anymore. Expectations have started changing. That meant that our rigor around quality for our data needed to support that new expectation. So this is where we focus all of our efforts around data quality on completeness of information, the enrichment information, because what we also found is the data that the industry was used to using in semi-manual approaches was not appropriate for fully automated systems. You couldn't have one cloud system talking to the cloud system and not have additional data points added into the entire data set. They're like, I need to know the lat long coordinates for every single location if I'm giving you any kind of tracking information, if I want to do any kind of a geospatial performance analysis in the future. So these types of conversations around completeness and enrichment, but then also the last one, which is really important, especially now, was latency. How do I get the information as soon as possible to the actual moment that the event or status change happened? And that's been a very, very fun and challenging problem to approach. But again, quality for us in this space is really about, how well and how automated is our service, and how complete is the data set to drive both the operational and performance understanding of our customers. And we work with forwarders, software companies, brands, BCOs, suppliers, the full gamut. Luckily, they all have the same pain point of they need instant visibility and great detail immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what we're seeing, to your point, over the last 18 months and the evolution of expectations, that's a continuation of the same trend, right? This has been going on for 25 years, and yesterday's fast is today's normal, and today's fast is going to be tomorrow's normal, and it's never just going to slow back down. And so I think we all have to approach sort of our business that way. But I think pre-pandemic, we were already hitting this interesting tipping point. And I think that's probably right about the time, Kyle, that you and I met, and Glenn, that's certainly right when I became familiar with what was going on at RPA. And so what really resonated with me, Kyle, the first time I learned about Vizion was, aggregating, bundling the APIs for automated operations. Okay, we've seen that work in other spaces. So certainly, developing that for the maritime space, like that makes a lot of sense. And the visibility industry for domestic trucking in the US, as an example, was really built on the foundation of tracking APIs for trucking companies. So it's all been enhanced, and it's all been developed, and we've all built on top of it. So I think initially we had to sort of have this collection, right? Just where's the data going to be? Are we even putting it into a system? Can we get it off of spreadsheets and clipboards? And then those systems had to start to connect, right? And I remember learning SQL to do ODBC data transfers for some of the early e-commerce systems. And I'm just some sales guy in the warehouse. Like, I can't imagine why customers let me into their database, but connections was really hard. And then those got better, right? And now for the full automation, we're just starting to hit that tipping point pre-pandemic. So Kyle, let's start with you. Pre-pandemic, you had this vision for Vizion, and no pun intended, and you knew that you were going to come to market. How has the expectation changed, and what is the customer conversation now relative to 18 months ago?
Yeah, I liked how you used normalcy, the new normal concept, because I think ahead of the pandemic, as you said, we were all very aware of the concept of creeping normalcy. It's this idea that there is slow change that happens over time, but it's so slow that people don't really recognize it all that much. It just becomes the way we all interact. But I think the pandemic had this effect of we shifted from creep to it's a full-blown pull the fire alarm. Everything is broken. We got to figure out how to fix this. And in terms of how it's affected our customers and their needs around reliability of data, I mean, there were some really specific pain points, just the port congestion issues, understanding that like a vessel arriving at a port doesn't really mean you're going to get your container anytime soon nowadays, right? You actually need much more detailed information, more granular information. I need not just know when the vessel arrives at port. I need to know where it is in its berthing schedule. I need to know when it actually has gotten to berth. I need to know when that container is discharged. I need to make sure I know all the statuses involved in that container actually getting processed by the terminal and made available to either then be loaded on rail or to be loaded onto a chassis and trucked away, dragged away to a destination. So the customer's expectations have really changed from like, I just need an ETA to no, everything is so inconsistent now. I need to know everything in very fine grained detail, just from an operations perspective. And I think what's been great with some of our more forward thinking customers is they've seen it as just not let's put the fire out, but we have to put this fire out. But the investment in doing that is actually going to help us be more strategic in terms of like our digital capabilities, understanding the performance of all of our partners, understanding the performance of all of our nodes, really being able to change their data foundation to leverage what companies will be building around machine learning and AI. Even if the beginning versions of MLA are extremely rudimentary in some sense, the benefit of those services is that they can look at the fine grained bits of the data and understand patterns that humans don't have the time or scope or capability to pull out on their own. So for our customers, just getting that finer grained detail automatically fed into their systems in a reliable manner has been game changing for many of them who have been struggling, especially with port to final destination door. And that's really made a big difference for us in this space as well.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. James, I'd love to hear from you. Like, how are some of the global forwarders dealing with the customer expectations and all the disruptions we've seen during the pandemic and then post-pandemic?
Yeah, there's a good couple of points Carl made there in terms of that kind of journey, right? And that journey from data to actually then analysis of data, and then the investment in that data down the line. And I think we very much subscribe to the same kind of thought pattern. For us, the idea was to say, well, yeah, that data is in an unstructured format. It needs to be made smoother. It needs to be made easier. And then at some point down the line, then actually that there's a huge amount that you can learn from that. And I think, to Carl's point, I think there's a long-term incentive there to be better at getting kind of better quality data and standardized data, et cetera, to essentially to make their businesses better. In terms of what we've seen pandemic, so for us, it's not just been the pandemic, right? It's also been Brexit. It's been, you mentioned Suez at some point. I mean, it's been, if you had to choose a year, well, if you had to choose a year, this would be it's a busy one, right? And that's good and bad. It's good and bad because a lot of our customers, they've got a ton of things to do. So if you speak to any freight forwarder, finding any time with a forwarder is difficult these days because they've got a lot on their hands. So there's that side, but then there's also the fact that if they do invest with us and they do work with us, then at some point they can relieve that burden. And you see it in the data. You see it in terms of, say, in the customs brokerage space in the UK and Europe around Brexit. You're seeing salaries like double as forwarders look to bring on staff. And so it's really that capacity issue. And that's what we've seen over the last, I guess, 9 to 12 months is that capacity issue is really coming to the fore. You can no longer kind of just sit on your hands and just hope the issue goes away. It's painful now. And so then that's incentivizing forwarders to think a bit differently about their business. It's incentivizing them to look at us more. And so there's very much kind of a tailwind behind us on that general theme. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of engagement and just an acceptance that things are changing. Whereas I think you probably didn't have that even just a year or two ago. So yeah, it's been great. It's been great timing, and I think that's going to continue. And I think it's an exciting place to be over the next couple of years.
That's interesting. Glenn, are you seeing the same thing on the automation side and the drive to do more with fewer people as folks are now struggling not just for access to containers, but also access to talent?
Yes, absolutely. I think more so is that a lot of companies are trying to prepare for the future, right? I think a lot of the freight forwarder that is in a good position that they're definitely seeing the margin they haven't seen before. And a lot of them is planning for the future that now how do I leverage those additional capitals into, a more kind of sustainable business into the future. I think this is one of the things that people are looking at. But you do see that there are a lot of customers just in this period of time, right? They're forced to hire, they just cannot handle those volume. But thankfully that some of the forwarders able to utilize us, that, hey, I can use we call it the bots, right? To replace, not to replace, maybe that's a bad term, to really to help with the team to do some of the work, deliver their workload. So that has been super helpful in digitizing and also in automating some of their processes. I think a lot of the people approaching this in a way that, hey, for one is what can you help with for me in the short term? I think that's where we can come in. It's more like the plug and play approach, really like the SaaS-based model. We don't want to, you don't even have to really get an IT team member to be involved with us, honestly, right? You make the decision and you roll out a bot, and then we automate one of the 30 processes that you probably want to automate, and then you get that part taken care of. So I mean, with that said, there is still a lot of manual work that you have to have touch point with the customers. You have to have the touch point with the ocean steamship lines and those you still require people, right? So I think it's the near term that what we can help them with to really automate those urgent processes and just allow them to scale and take care of the customer. And the other part is really looking into the future, like how do I leverage my the capital now and really better position myself the post-pandemic that what everyone is thinking about. So I think we've seen kind of two trends going on, but absolutely we in the, I call it, the second way. I mean, digital transformation has been just talked so much. I think we're kind of in the second wave of that, really getting into that. How do we get, now we're everyone finding that, hey, we're finding in a global system. I was still a lot of them trying to be in a global system. And then now we're in a global system. Now, how do we standardize the process? Now, how do we optimize the process, right? This is where we're going in, right? From standardization to optimization with some of the technologies out there and help them out. And I think that's kind of the trend that we're seeing that people's definitely, stepping into the space.
Yeah, I think the macro level trend from, the first three statements here is we're seeing, whether it's the BCOs or the brands or the forwarders, is there's folks out there that aren't wasting this crisis, and they're taking full advantage of deploying capital now to enhance operations in the future, because these surges in demand that like right now feels kind of normal, which is crazy. I guess what we're seeing is some predictions that these probably aren't going away. So Dan, last but not least, I've been excited to hear on this topic in particular. Certainly we've seen as remote work expanded after the economic crisis in the early 2010s, remote work expanded, and so did the move to cloud-based systems, and folks needed more planning and production software and things like that to operate together more effectively. Is that a trend that you guys saw during the pandemic at Anvyl, as supply chain teams were looking for a place to collaborate and live together?
Yeah, so the pandemic definitely heightened the more of the visibility into your manufacturing, because it's perceived as an area of, I can make up time here. But with that comes the drawbacks, because a lot of these brands actually don't really fully understand that it does take X amount of days to produce the goods. These suppliers have to go through their own SOPs and GMPs that they've set up for bringing in raw materials or cleaning machinery, and then scheduling across the hundreds of thousands of different companies that are also submitting purchase orders at the same time. So it heightens that awareness around your production planning and your decision making, understanding fully like, what are your lead times? Just because it says it's 45-day lead times, there's a lot of ifs that are actually below that. Like, is it contingent on my payment terms? Is it contingent on a final approval for if you're doing like a silk screen on a bottle, final approval on golden samples? There's a lot of if statements that actually have to be hit even before you go into production, and then your clock starts from there. So what we're encouraging is getting those collaboration up front early, and then understanding what you're doing, automating if it's payment terms and there's a deposit needed, get that out right away so you're in queue, because there's going to be someone who's right behind you who will skip you. And the suppliers are doing actually everything in their power to get your product shipped out the door at a reasonable time, but they can't do their own shortcuts as well. So it's staying up to date, accuracy on matching your 3-way match or your 4-way match, and just keeping apprised on those status updates throughout your product lifecycle.
Quick question there, Dan. Sorry to interrupt, Charlie. I was curious, how has, in light of what Anvyl does for so many of the brands and the relationship with the suppliers, how have the relationships between the supplier and the end brand kind of changed? Is there more empathy? Is there more performance? Like, once these tools get in place, how has that relationship evolved?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it actually really depends on how a brand's interpreting who their supplier is. Like, are you using a broker? So if you're using a broker, you actually may not even know who your end manufacturer supplier is. But suppliers actually really do enjoy the human connection, because they want to know, they know they're making a physical product, but they want to know who is actually producing that physical product as well. So it adds an element of like just human interaction and understanding, and it brings them closer together as well, so they can actually collaborate, and it just strengthens the business relationship. Like, you should be sending up those business documents with your manufacturer and adhering to certain principle, and you should care about it. It shouldn't. Suppliers get blamed for a lot of things, but that's because brands don't actually understand what the process is for them, because they're, as we mentioned, if ports are congested, well, they're stressed out because it's just one more hurdle that they have to overcome. So they're going to shift blame and responsibility to somebody else. So you have to be friendly and understanding of your supplier relations. And look, we don't replace phone calls, but we central source document filing, sharing documents, production schedules, and messages, and then you can quickly just relate to those at any time to fully understand what's actually going on in your order management process.
Yeah, I was just going to point it.
Oh, go for it, Charlie.
No, please.
Well, I was going to say, so it's just something that Dan said there, which I really like, Dan. I like the relationship thing, because I think you can get a bit hung up on automation and all that kind of stuff, when really ultimately what humans are good at, what we're good at as people is the relationship side, that creativity side. And I totally buy that people want those kind of relationships. And in fact, if you want to tie that back to the pandemic, I mean, that's what people have been missing out on, right? Is those kind of relationships. And so I think that's often underestimated, is because a lot of the time, any relationship, any supply chain relationship is really one about trust. And that goes across everything, right? It will go across a forwarding relationship. It'll go, like Charlie, you mentioned trade finance. I mean, trade finance is essentially all about trust. Trust between a supplier or between an importer and export or whatever it is so important. And I think when we think about our business, what we're doing, for instance, is we're taking the rote rote basic work out, so that people can go back to that trust and that relationship side. And that's really I think that's really powerful. So anyway, look, sorry for interrupting, but that's I thought it was a great point.
I'm grateful that you brought that up, because I think it's at the core of why we all like the complexity of this industry and all the challenges behind it, is the collaboration and the fact that these problems are so sort of global in nature that we can all come together and sort of throw in a couple of cents each and get to the right end result. I think what I was really struck with, as Dan, as you were communicating, was from what I'm hearing is the sort of visibility and the pressure that Kyle's team feels on the quality of data to get down to the minute milestone updates, that far along in the transportation process, we're now seeing equal amounts of pressure applied all the way upstream as people become aware of the competition for capacity on the manufacturing side of the process and the production side. So I think that's just a fascinating trend that really started at our front doorstep when packages started showing up in 2 days, 15 years ago. And we've sort of just kept pushing, saying, no, get it here faster. And one of the themes that kind of came out of yesterday was, one of the elements of Vizion's, business model that sort of resonated with me when I first met Kyle was that pressure on the quality of information, the pressure for that information. It's only coming because the end person waiting for the package, that person that's writing the little tiny check at the bottom of the transaction, their voice matters the most, right? When you aggregate that all together. And what we're seeing now is that the manufacturers are leaning back into just-in-time manufacturing, and they're relying on quality information and visibility, because now it's not opaque to manufacture overseas, or at least it shouldn't be if we all do our jobs, right? And we execute. So I think the ocean container has become the warehouse now. That's where the product is sitting while it's being sold and being tracked, and to hear that it's even penetrating into the manufacturer facility, I think is incredible. So now let's move on to I think one of the more exciting parts of our discussion, and really what we're all, or at least we all should be listening to every single day, is the customer's expectations and what are they pushing us on to deliver, because we've got a ton of innovation on this discussion right now, but customers tend to give us the best ideas. So Kyle, I know this is something that you and Tyler are super passionate about with the team. What are some of the conversations that are bubbling up now that are kind of getting you guys whiteboarding together?
Yeah, so the expectations of the industry are very exciting to us, because we really empathize because we showed up in the industry with the same expectations and were kind of surprised by what we found. And we knew there could be a better way of working, because one of the situations with supply chain is, you can't do it by yourself, right? It has to be a network. It has to be a series of companies that are sharing and partnering. And it was just great to have customers who were actually so transparent in their expectations as well. And as I mentioned earlier, expectations were different several years ago. It was, can I just get an ETA for my ocean container? Now it's, I need to have the detailed, granular information to help me identify any mistransshipment, help me identify any blank sailing, help me identify any lingering time of a vessel in port, help me identify when that container is actually going to get processed by the terminal. Let me get this information in a way that is scaled up and automated, so that it almost like represents the activities of one of my star team members. Like if you go to a freight forwarder, you have this like standout operations or customer support person on the team, right? And they go to great lengths. They're calling everyone, they're sending emails, they're digging around and finding information that, as like a single container being a case study, you're like, this is the ideal situation. Well, the expectations we hear today is companies show up, our customers say, what that star employee does, I want you to do in a completely automated fashion, 99.9% of the time, and be able to provide me that granular detail. And part of that new expectation comes from, as you were saying, the consumer who's driving all this, that they want what they want, and they want it delivered when they want it delivered. And this has been interesting for us, because this expectation around this more granular information that represents that kind of star employee activity has also forced us to go beyond what our original connections were. So we spent quite a bit of time building connections with the ocean carriers, but now where our investment and time goes is direct connections with the port terminal operators, direct connections with the largest drayage transportation systems, TMS systems here in the United States and over in Europe, direct connections with the major rail lines, pulling in AIS data from multiple AIS providers, really being a pipe that goes about and takes that model of what the star employee figured out for themselves, where they can go and Sherlock all this stuff together, learn how they did that, and then come back and say, okay, what's possible today to fully automate? What's possible next quarter to fully automate? And really partnering up with the customers, because their expectations are, I need as much detail as possible, as quickly as possible now. I know it can be done. I've seen people do it. Can your system do it? Which is a very different challenge. And something that Tyler and I get super excited about every single day, trying to solve.
I think, James, it sounds like the perfect problem for artificial intelligence. Are your customers, also looking to you to come back to them and teach them how to be, as efficient as their top performers?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. It's a big part of it. I think there's a certain amount of operational expertise, right? That staff at freight forwarders, or frankly anywhere, kind of build up over their careers. And some of that we absolutely can't replace. We do manage expectations as well, right? I think AI, that we're an AI company. We've seen it all. Right? We've seen all of the expectations. You kind of have people who are obviously sometimes very skeptical, but some people who are like totally bought in, and like they think that AI will solve everything. And the truth is that it's somewhere in the middle. So there's a lot of really great challenges around the kind of tech that we have and that we've built. And look, we've been working on this for a long time. We work with some of the largest kind of multinationals around. We work globally. We have customers over Asia, Europe, US. We've experienced a lot, and we're continuing to learn. I don't think we've fully solved this problem. And we're humble enough to know that as well. And so there's a certain amount of expectation management, and that we learn together with our customers. So every single customer we work with really helps get us to where we are. And I kind of think that's the only way you can build a startup that serves kind of large customers, enterprises, SMEs, I think you kind of kid yourself that you know what the solution is going to be like when you start, and you really don't. And so it's about working together with customers, working together with operators, really exposing something to the harsh light of day and finding out all the things that are wrong with it and all the things that are great with it. But then to kind of reiterate, just working together with partners. And as I said, we've been super lucky to have some amazing partners that we work with that help to improve the product. And I think that's all you can do.
I think that's very well said, and I think humble is the right word there, because while the goals are audacious and you're offering amazing operations, I think staying focused and understanding exactly where you need to be, I think is phenomenal. And then also the exposure to the harsh light of day and being willing to let people say that your baby is ugly at the early stage, knowing that you just solved a problem that they don't have at the moment. I think those are all parts of the journey, and if you're not willing or sort of like ready for that part, the rest of it sort of you're going to struggle with as well. Kyle, did you have something you want to add on there?
Yeah, question for James. You get to see the full extreme from people who are naysayers and say this isn't going to solve any problems in my business in some way. AI is overhyped. The people who really buy in, and I know you guys work with some very sizable forwarders who even have amazing reputations in terms of their customer support and customer service as well. I'm curious, when you're first engaging with a forwarder and they're asking many things because they believe AI can do anything or everything, where do you usually advise them to start? What are some of the fundamental kind of pain points across the forwarders that you say, this is a good place to start and grow from?
Yeah. There's all sorts of answers to that, Kyle. so I think, but a lot of the stuff, like our products are pretty well flagged in terms of on our website. We see what we see in terms of the kind of the documents and the processes that forwarders look at are often things like AP invoices, obviously clearly a huge pain point. Commercial invoices on the custom side, another big pain point. What we kind of the pre-alert aspect is another one, and it's usually one of those. And they're kind of beachhead products for sure. And so, for instance, AP invoices, to kind of really get into kind of a specifics. So we on that side, we can pretty much straight through process an AP invoice, and we do it in a pretty smart way. That's often a good place to start, and it's often one where we see kind of a real pain, a real kind of pain point there for our customers. So that's typically a good starting point. But then it opens up the door to a huge amount of other stuff.
And those are tough problems to solve because they're coming in via email. Like there might be getting dropped on an FTP server. Sometimes it's a phone call to a correction of some sort, right? They're semi-structured, but then you get 37 different structures you see recurring.
Yeah. I mean, have you look? There's the kind of like multi-line AP invoices, for instance. It sounds trivial, but multi-line, multi-shipment AP invoices, really difficult. And we've spent a lot of time building out tech to do that at a really granular level as well. So we're not just doing like totals here. We're doing individual line items here in a fully automated way. So there's a lot of granular detail you can get into, and I'm always amazed at how creative people get when they build invoices. It's like accountants have like there's no other creative outlet. So you know what? Yeah. I'm gonna get my creative juices out on an invoice and really see what happens if I put I'm gonna nest 3 tables into them, and I'll spread it out over 10 pages. And so we're really familiar with those problems, and there are things that shouldn't take time but do. And so that's a great example of an area that we add value to freight forwarders.
That's awesome. Glenn, I know that you have some perspectives on both what the customers are challenging you on, and then the overall process. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking about and working on now.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of probably just want to expand on what Kai was just saying there, right? I think one of the things out there in today is just with the ETA, which is big. Now, our customer wants more of a predictive ETA, right? It's not just estimated, it's predictive. It's really in analyzing all of those data sets and to see, it's probably not expecting a delay, but how soon you're going to tell me this delay, and how accurate can you get those ETA right for me? I'm sure that means a lot for Dan's customers as well. So I think that would involve a lot of the, on one side is really the data science that kind of drives that. Like, hey, how do you predict that right ETA, not just for the port level? Right now you have the inland, the IPI, right? When it's going to get to Chicago, right? And then how long it's going to take, sit in the port for however long, and then get there, right? So I think that takes, on one side takes a lot of effort, and the other side is really on the connectivity piece, right? They want the hey, now that the carrier data are crap, right? 30% accuracy, right? That's kind of what our customers telling us. So they want the terminal data now. They want the drayage data. They want the rail data. And they want it to know, even within the rail data, which stopping point they're at, so that they can predict, right? If I have a shipment from out to Chicago, you're not even in Phoenix yet, and it's not going to get there tomorrow. But very often the provider is not updating that ETA until the day of or right before. So your end shippers kind of get hanged there. It just they don't know this information, right? Now all of this kind of is interesting. That is kind of ties into one of our product that we do, the detention demerge, right? And the really for one is, my God, how long has that container sitting at the terminal, or how quickly they can pick it up? We need to know those information from multiple points, right? We cannot just rely on carriers anymore. We have to have the terminal data. I'm sure Kyle has a lot of fun on that. Talking about terminal data, hey, by the way, you have about 80 terminals operated in the US or more, and then you have to deal with, and you get those data set, and you have to cross-reference it against the carrier side. That is not an easy task. Now, once it gets into the kind of end destination, right, you get the container picked up by the shipper, then you started wondering about the detention, right? Like, hey, have they returned the container? How long has it been sitting there? I think a lot of things there is that you have so many different data points that Kyle has to compile. And then there's the accuracy of those data points, and also a presentation of those data points. Because a lot of our customers, I think they came to us in the first place is that we kind of can track the individual shipment of those containers. But if you're asking me, hey, how much of a detention demerge cost that you had incurring today for your entire organization for that 2,000 containers? And I can tell you probably 90% of them has no clue. They will either say, well, pass on to that shipper, hopefully they'll pay, or that we have to deal with the trucker that done one time of those shipments, but they did not return the container on time, and the carrier is building the forwarder, right? So we're trying to provide a visit. I mean, for us, we're a little bit different from I guess Kyle will be part of our component in corporate to be really providing that timestamp, right? When can I pick up my container? When was the empty return has been done? And then ties back to the carrier, say, hey, how many free days do I have? Essentially, is that my carrier tariff free time, or it is the contract free time? How much of those fee I'm incurring? I think the number are staggering. I mean, I have a top, kind of customer in Canada who was saying that, for one of their top customers, they're incurring like $30,000 for 30 containers in a week, right? The numbers are staggering, and that we're just trying to give them all of those information in one place, as accurate as possible, and driving that decision making, because they're seeing the number ticking, right? Okay, today is $500,000, and tomorrow is $500,000 plus X, so that they can take action on those critical containers that they need to take care of. I think that's really kind of the things is that you need that reliability, and the reliability drives you to have multiple source points so that you can cross-reference. And then also you have to have that platform that to let the customer interact with, and seeing those warning signs so that they can take action to it. I mean, is data has to drive action. I think that's what we've been really trying to help them to do, is drive that action. But you've got to get those data right to drive the right action, or else you're not getting there. With all of the things I'm talking about right now, you're seeing that I'm adding the layer of free time data, and that's again all over the place. And you know, that's why it's such an interesting part, just to get the accuracy rate right, and then also getting those things together, which has been super challenging. What I have to say, you know, just so many data points you have to collect. Yeah, that's kind of a long way to kind of wrap a lot of things together, but that's what kind of we're tackling. I know that is going to go deeper and deeper. You know, each of the data point they want more details. So.
Right. I think the more data we have, the more questions we have, right? So, Dan, how does this compare and contrast to some of the conversations you're having about the further upstream end of the supply chain?
Yeah, so we get it all the time. How can we best leverage data to make those informed decisions for, if it's for future production runs or for current production runs? But in that as well, what we see is the experience level between on certain brands, it varies across the board. So you may have somebody with little to no supply chain ops experience at a large company and somebody with a lot of the experience at a smaller company. It's not flowed across the board. And especially from being in the role, like the experience of the supply chain role, it does vary significantly, because it's a role that not many people fill initially if it's a smaller stage company. So that experience level in detail, it's hard. So there's a lot of education that we do just to walk them through, but we don't want to control the process for them. They need to understand the process. So we look at things like, how can you automate, as Glenn mentioned earlier, what stages can you do where you just put less pressure on it? So in freight, for instance, all right, you know your order is going to be done in on X date. Can we automate where if it's 7 to 14 days before the packing list is shared from the supplier, so that way you can start the freight conversation? But also in supply chain is there's a lot of cross collaboration internally, and you need everybody plugged in. Finance needs to be plugged in because they need to know if they have to pay someone, but they also need to know what your COGS are. Your brand team needs to know what is actually going to be printed with your design. And then marketing needs to know, when are these goods arriving so I can start selling. So it's, how do we leverage existing data that's already in platforms, integrate it in Anvil, or leverage from Anvil to communicate with those systems and provide that so everybody is connected. Like, people shouldn't be in their individual silos and waiting for things to arrive to them. They should know when things arrive, and so they can plan accordingly. And that's what we're, in a sense, trying to tackle for this year is, okay, leveraging on those communications, tell me when if this order is going to ship on time. And those are things that we're trying to interpret with our customers today and expand on our platform, because everyone interprets what they want differently. But how can we do it in a way where they can take those proper steps and getting that across the team? Because ultimately they're measured on, are we selling product and shipping the product on time? And it's just getting that proper documentation to them all in one place so they can further expand to other SKUs or ensure no stockouts.
I think there's some interesting points of the conversation that you just made in the conversation there, especially early in your statement around the disparity in the talent in these supply chain groups. And I would almost sort of, speculate that the majority of the folks on this group, like, we're having conversations with some of the best and brightest and the forward thinkers in the space. We're looking for the people that are looking for these types of solutions already. They've become aware of the problem, and they've, started to kind of tinker around with mentally, at least, how they would develop a solution. And then, hopefully here comes Vector or Vizion or RPA or Anvil. But I think one of the things that I just want to point out about this call is, 15 years ago, being in logistics and supply chain, We weren't all talking about it as often. Certainly Amazon has been driving the conversation for 20 plus years now, but 15 years ago, it wasn't as hot. And, now as I'm kind of, looking at your guys' backgrounds online, and we've got like a former hedge fund manager, software engineer, we're all sitting here talking about supply chain and logistics. So I think the sort of overall brain power that's come into the space was a bit of a precursor to the capital that's now come into the space, which is now attracting more brain power. So, I just want to point that out. And I actually just sent an article to a friend who runs a good size supply chain operation here in Omaha. I sent him an article that was in Forbes just 2 weekends ago about how supply chain talent is now, really in its highest demand ever, and that the future C-suite executives are most likely going to be coming out of supply chain. And I think, that a lot of what you just said speaks to that. So, Dan, let's start back with you right now. Let's kind of get into where you see things going in the next, 1 to 3 years as we come out of the pandemic. What are some of the key themes that you think about? It doesn't necessarily have to be on visibility, but just supply chain in general. Maybe from talent, capital, trends, technology, et cetera.
Yeah, it's actually encouraging recently with like U.S. manufacturing as a whole. I think they recorded I believe for March, the second highest PMI rating, the Purchasing Managers Index, in over almost like 15 years, which is very encouraging, just getting jobs back into here, but also bringing domestic production here as well. But with that, though, there's some things that can be concerning as well, like corrugate. We've seen, because everybody's doing D2C right now, those costs have increased. In April, so there was a 4 to 10% hike on corrugate, and there's going to be most likely more later this year. After talking to a manufacturer last week, plastic costs have increased as well, but there's also the shift to go away from plastic as well, other eco-friendly alternatives. But then you see in the news Procter & Gamble, who's going to raise some of their pricing later this fall. What does that do to the smaller companies, because they don't have as much margin to play with? Do people shift to them, or does that cause them to reshift or rethink their business? So there's a lot of downstream effects where even with all these congestions, they don't want to run out of inventory, but what are these hikes doing to their bottom line and margins that are going to need to be thought about earlier? Because manufacturers need to, if they're getting hit with the hikes, that gets pushed to the brand, who they got to push it to somebody, and that ends up being us, the consumers. So it's going to be an interesting phenomenon over the next year plus on what happens to smaller companies or even established companies as they play around with those margin, the tightening on their margins.
Sure, and I think in particular with the move to D2C, and the CPG companies really sort of have been in control, for the last couple of years, and with global stimulus money running out in the stock market, we'll see if it can continue to mint Robinhood millionaires at the clip that it has. But I think all of those things will be interesting to sort of be add to the complexity around margin compression and increases in prices. James, any predictions post-pandemic that you care to make coming out of hopefully the worst time we see in supply chain disruption in our careers?
Yeah. When you I'm sure, Carl, you're familiar with this. When you start a company, I think you kind of have to be an optimist, and I am an eternal optimist. And so, I see a lot of great stuff coming out of, say, the pandemic, and you have to take the positives, right? And the positives are some of the stuff we've discussed already. I think there's amazing opportunities for things to be reinvented. So I think that's going to continue for sure. And then specifically on the freight forwarding side, I see this. Yeah, look, the business is going to shift. It's going to shift from something that is less scalable to something that is going to be a bit more of freight forward is going to be more tech driven, right? I don't think that's saying anything massively new, but that's going to increase, and that rate is going to increase. So I think, and this is actually something I had mentioned in an earlier call. I do think you're going to see that tech edge at freight forwarders will be the differentiator between freight forwarders. And so it is incumbent on forwarding to embrace technology. And look, I've got a vested interest in saying that, of course, but to remain competitive, I think technology is going to be front and center of how forwarders look at the future. And I think in 3 years' time, I think things will have changed a lot. And I think what is obvious or not necessarily obvious now will be really obvious in 3 years' time. And I think the way we look at the world will be really obvious in 3 years' time. So so some interesting times.
I'd like to sort of just add on to a couple of things that you said just around differentiation, because I think it's gone from, automation is a nice to have, maybe something that you can sort of explore and figure out. And right now, I think for the companies that are looking out 3 to 5 years, it's become table stakes. And if there's no strategy or approach to get there, I think people are already too late. And then certainly there's going to be the laggards where 3 to 5 years from now, they're just going to be highly exposed on their margins, their competitiveness, the customer user experience. And at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that the world's not going to wait for those folks, and I think the differentiation may be more of like sink or swim, make it or not. And so I think that'll be fascinating to sort of continue to track that trend. Glenn, from your vantage point of being sort of one of the guys out there in the last 10 years that was first people to get some rates out there and sort of automate one of the most complex parts of it, and now take on the broader challenge. Is RPA going to be integrating, space transportation systems within 3 years, or where are we going to be then?
That's a good bold prediction. We will try everything we can. You know what? We're actually seeing similar things, right? I think about 8 years ago in rate management space, if you have someone try to quote online, right? People are like, what the heck is that, right? Right now, everyone wants to have the ability to be a digital forwarder and to have the ability to call online to get rates instantly, right? Like that becomes a norm. Like if you don't have that, you're behind. Every big forwarder, small forwarder, rush the digital platform and try to have something somewhere that their customer can access right away. And I think, RPA technology in general, right? It is like what happened 8 years ago with rate management. It's just such a new concept. What is a robot? What can they do, right? It's really, really new. But we're seeing that it's becoming the norm. We're seeing that is on the table of the CEO and then the CIO that this is going to be their core of the agenda for the next 2 to 3 years, or even into the 5 years time. And the one that is able to adopt that early on, right, that to automate their operations and processes and it will make them more competitive, especially, the mid and small size forwarder. They want to find that special niche to really survive and then grow and competing with the bigger boys, right? They do have the ability to be more agile, and then they're able to look at the solutions like ours, they're able to quickly adapt to it, and then start growing with it. Now, it's a really interesting concept. I think that we were actually talking to an Australian forwarder a couple months back. He's starting a new forwarding business. He was saying that this time, I don't want to hire any operations people. I want to use RPA technology to grow, and I want to leverage as much as they can, with the technology. I think this is unheard of, right? It's kind of people's game. If you're walking into the forwarder, in I guess in Asia, in China, you're looking at, oh my God, I mean, there's just tons of people there with keen information, right? I think that trend is getting kind of really shifted into now what process I can automate. And I can tell you that there's a lot of them that you can do. It seems simple, we tackle one area is just getting the data from, like, say, documents to their ERP system, right? But then there's just so many things out there, the warehouse management system. I mean, there's just so many manual processes still out there that needs to be automated. I'm seeing that we're at the level of probably 10 to 20% automated for any freight forwarder, I would say, out there. That in the next 2 to 5 years, we're going to be seeing that, especially with the smaller freight forwarder, because they're more agile. They can get into the 60 to 70%, right? Really, that that is the automation ratio that we can see. And it's not only just on the documents, on the conversations, on the workflow, everything around with how to make their business more efficient and how to do more with less. I think that's kind of the trend that we're seeing. It's definitely getting into the head of people, and there's no strangers to them anymore. And I think this is going to be becoming to be the norm. And if you're not acting on as fast, like you said, Charley, right? You'll become the kind of you're behind. You'll rush through to build a digital platform while everyone already has it, right? I think that's kind of what we're seeing in the next 2 to 5 years out of pandemic.
I think that supports sort of this idea that digitization is nipping at the heels on both ends, and ultimately that intermediary's role. Whereas maybe 20 years ago, when freightquote.com launched, everybody thought that the freight broker was going away, and here we are. Freight brokerage has quadrupled in size. But the reality is freight forwarding, freight management, that's not going to go away. But they're looking a lot more like staffing companies. As brands and BCOs continue to trim their internal transportation staffs, they're looking to transfer those manual operations and processes over to the 3PL and the forwarder. If the forwarder can bundle those, operate them, in a highly automated way, eliminating the manual work, that sustains that position in the industry for another period of time into the future. In absence of that, it's really difficult to imagine that third layer existing in an unautomated way. So, Kyle, why don't you wrap it up by kind of letting us know how you're thinking about the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, one of the comments that was made earlier about entrepreneurs, and clearly all of us have an entrepreneurial bend on this panel, is that optimism. And I believe in the better. I believe in the better, in my marrow. I have always been deeply attracted to problems that seem intractable, deeply attracted to finding some additional advantage, new level of optimization. I mean, that's why I've done so many businesses in analytics at the end of the day. And what's, I think, going to be exciting in the next year and the next few years in our space is we're going to finally make that transition in terms of specifically around visibility, whether at the supplier end, at the last mile, anything in between. We're going to be making this transition where parts of the industry have been the innovators in that traditional product adoption curve, the innovators, 2.5%. What we started witnessing in the last year is that the market has now moved to the early adopters, which is that hefty, 20-something%. And just from Vizion's experience alone, you go back to our first year of business, we signed up as many pilots in our first year as we sign up per month now. And there's not much of a difference in our team size either. We're still a few sets of hands that are really focused on automation, technology, building modern software on modern infrastructure. But the pandemic changed timing. And for these entrepreneurs, these ever optimists, these believers in the better, that timing can often be the greatest point of frustration, because you see things, you believe in things that will be true in the next 10 years. But you have to wait for when the industry is ready. And what we saw the pandemic do in terms of Vizion's business and our partners is everyone was scrambling. Everyone was trying to band-aid with manual operations really quickly to just solve the problems. Let's make the fires manageable. But what that did at the end of 2020 is everyone thought differently about their budgets. Companies, those early adopters, are now setting money aside to change, to be that better. And that's really exciting from our perspective, because we see it across all these companies: Anvyl, Vector, RPA, Mango Freight. Well, we almost couldn't exist 5 or 10 years ago because the industry wasn't ready for us. But now we're seeing that change. And I think we were chatting just the other day, Charley, about what's that Gartner report that said visibility market is going to supposed more than 3x in the next 3 years. That is a crazy amount of growth for an industry that is built on supply chain, which is 10% of the gross domestic product of the planet. Goes back into moving everything around the world. So from our perspective here at Vizion, we're really excited that we think that the starting gun has finally been shot off, and companies are really taking digitization, transformation, and automation, everything in cloud, much more seriously than they have. They've felt the pain, and the early adopters are here now. They're spending dollars. So this is the time. This is the time to build relationships. This is the time to better understand the details, because as we're going to get an influx of companies showing up in the space, every single company has a unique take on their problem, right? Maybe best case scenario, 80% is a common denominator across them, but we really need to understand the depths of these problems, because as we transition from that star employee to that advanced scalable automation, the devil is going to be in the details. So companies that are highly focused on a specific part of the problem that we can start banding together and solving these visibility issues, from sourcing of the tier 3 raw material all the way to the reverse logistics of returns and such from the consumer. Stitching these companies together is what's going to really be appearing to happen over the next year, and is going to be an absolute certainty 10 years from now. Last night, that was it.
Well, look, I think that's it's inspirational, sort of to hear, I guess, the new guy on the block's take in terms of just, a couple of years into, being in this space and thinking where we could go, in the next however long. I think it'll be fun for us all to hopefully cross paths around the world as things open back up, and maybe even actually see each other at a live event again. But nevertheless, the one thing that I think we can all agree on is that, to kind of close it all out, is Kyle ended on the theme of interoperability and banding together and working together to solve these things. And Dan made some interesting comments earlier about rising costs in the supply chain and how that's going to steer some of the decisions that we're all making. And I think, if we all continue to drive change and innovation into the space with a mindset of sustainability and leaving the world better than we found it, I think ultimately that's why we're all here. So super inspirational chat with all of you guys today. I'm glad that we were able to come together and have this conversation. Thank you all for being here. I'm grateful to have crossed paths. Take care. Have a good day.